Like a lot of people my age, my parents and my grandparents were involved in the Second World War. My nan actually worked in a munitions factory, and my father was in the Navy working on the Russian convoys and in various other places. My uncle actually worked in Africa, but my aunt and mother were evacuees. My aunt made a record of her life as an evacuee, so as part of the VE celebrations I thought I would read it out to you. I've always wanted to write about the impact being an evacuee had on our lives. It made a big impression on my sister and I. I don't think we'll ever forget it. I can't be sure of the exact dates, but it all happened in the space of 18 to 24 months. I was on holiday at Whitstable with the Country Holiday Fund in 1939. There were rumours of war and a sense of fear in the air, as if something awful was going to happen. Being only 10 and a half, or was it 11, I was too young to understand. The man of the house with whom we were billeted had a tin helmet, and he used to go out in the evenings for drill purposes. We wondered what it was all about. Next part I remember was someone came from London to take us home. When we arrived, it didn't look like the London we'd left behind. There were sandbags everywhere, and the windows were crisscrossed with tape. Places were boarded up. It was all rather frightening. We hadn't been home a week before we were evacuated. My sister, aged 8, and my brother, aged 4. I, being the eldest, was in charge. My mother sat up all hours of the night sewing our haversacks from sacking and making sure everything was nice for us to take away. No one knows what her thoughts must have been. We all assembled in the school playground, kitted out in Wellington boots, labels, gas masks and haversacks. Our mothers were all crying. I remember I couldn't look at mine in case she set me off. I was trying to be brave. We went by tube to Edgware Station and then put on another train to Luton. We didn't know at the time where we were going. Neither did our parents. A kindly porter helped me with my brother and their sister, and he said, "I've been told to look out for you. I know your mum and dad." That really cheered us up, although we was kidding, of course. Anyway, we arrived in Luton and were duly taken to a church hall where we were given some groceries to take to our billets. Our first billet was a newly married couple. They were nice, but we didn't stay with them for very long. Then we were billeted with another couple who had 2 children and also a grandmother staying there. That lasted about 2 months. So it was off to another billet. This time we struck lucky. It was the best of the lot. Mr. and Mrs. Newland were the best of the lot. They were kind to us. Nothing was too much trouble for them. They had 2 sons awaiting call-up. I think we were with them for about 6 months, but they were middle-aged and Mrs. Newland's health wasn't very good. And I think we were a bit of a handful for her in the end. So my parents decided to fetch us back to London. Everything was okay for a while. I believe they called this period the phony wars. Then it all started again. The children had to be evacuated. Once more we were kitted out as before. At this time my mother was also expecting her 4th child, due to be born sometime in September 1940. This was now July. Anyway, off we go again. We had a very long train journey. I think we were travelling all day, and we arrived at Penzance very late in the evening, very tired and very upset. We were taken to the town hall, where we all sat around in groups of 3s or 4s, waiting for someone to come and choose us. People were coming and going, looking us over as if we were in a cattle market. Single children and doubles were going, but nobody wanted 3. I was so afraid we were going to be split up, and Mum and Dad had told us to stay together. I think it was about 11 o'clock at night when this elderly lady decided she would take us. We went home in a taxi. We went to this lady's home. Her name was Mrs. Khan, where upon entering the door we were greeted with a glass case in which there was a large stuffed dog. We were told it was once a family pet. We thought that was odd. She then called to her grandchildren, "Sheila, Molly, come quickly, we have some little evacuees." They thought it was fun. We thought otherwise, and by this time we were all crying. We seemed such a long way from home, and we did so want our mum and dad. In the meantime, my mother had gone home very distraught. My father found her in the bedroom when he came home from work. I suppose her condition didn't help. We were taken to our bedroom and put in a big double bed. I think we cried ourselves to sleep. Next morning, breakfast consisted of porridge you could cut with a knife, and we went to the local school to see our teachers and to sort out lessons. The arrangements were half day for evacuees and half days for the locals. The other half of the day was spent on the beach having lessons and learning to swim, which we thoroughly enjoyed. I cannot remember what the arrangements were in the winter. Quite often the minesweepers used to explode the mines while we were sitting on the beach. The noise was terrific. We used to get air raid warnings whilst on the beach, and it used to be one mad scramble to the shelter. Back to the billet. The food wasn't too bad, but we didn't like fried stew very much. It was made so thick and was left cold and then sliced and fried. There was only one baking day a week, when everything was cooked for the week ahead. This was when I first tasted lardy cake and saffron cake. It was good. Oh, and our first taste of Cornish cream. We thought it was margarine and duly left it. Now to get to the bad part. I was responsible for seeing my brother and sister were kept clean. Our washing facilities left a lot to be desired. There was an old-fashioned toilet outside with a big wooden lid top. I was given a bowl of water to wash down all three of us. We never did have a bath. I don't remember having our hair washed either. We hadn't been there long when a bomb was dropped at the bottom of our road. It was early morning when it happened. We were in bed and I remember the window crashing in and glass all over the bed. The road was a shambles. I wrote a letter to my parents enclosed a piece of shrapnel, thinking they hadn't seen any in London. Life was dragging on, and we did so miss our mum and dad. We used to wonder how we could go home. My father used to send us sixpence every week. We thought if we could save up for a few weeks, we would have enough for the fare home. But I'm afraid that after a trip to the cinema and a bag of chips, there wasn't anything left to save. I wrote to my Aunt Flo in London, asking her to try and persuade my parents to let us come home. But Mrs. Khan caught me writing the letter and confiscated. Anyway, she said, Dunkirk has fallen. I didn't really know what she meant. In the meantime, my mother had given birth to a baby boy during the time the Docks took the heaviest bombing of the war so far. Born on September the 3rd, 1940 at St Bartholomew's Hospital, at the time, I believe all the parents were evacuated to Friar Barnet Hospital. Mum later told us there had been some awful casualties that night. Anyway, it was decided that Mum should come to Penzance to stay. We were all pleased that she was coming. She travelled down when little Alfie was about a month old. She arrived one evening very late. Our greeting was, "Oh, Mum's come. She's got a new baby and new teeth." She was given a biscuit and a cup of tea. She must have been starving after travelling all day and feeding the baby. After we'd all said our hellos, she noticed my brother was missing. "Oh, Mum," I said, "they've taken Ken away to a hospital because he had spots." It was in fact scabies brought about by inadequate washing facilities and not enough care. I remember I was so upset when they took him, wondering what my mum and dad would say. I felt it was all my fault, but then I was only 12 myself. Mother was given a bed for the night. It was a filthy room. We looked at the baby the next morning and he was smothered in flea bites. Then Mum noticed us scratching. She looked in our hair and we were all lousy. It must have been a terrible shock for her. As we left London, we were spotless. When we mentioned to Mrs. Can the brown things hopping about in the bed, she said, "Not to worry, they come up from the beach." Of course, Mum knew differently. Mum took us to see the school headmistress to complain. The poor woman was very upset as she knew we came away from London clean because we had to have an inspection before we left. Also, the headmistress knew my mother very well and knew my mum was a very clean person. She had many complaints to deal with. This is what so annoys me. When I hear people say that the Londoners were really dirty, I expect there were one or two exceptions, but as always, it's the minority you hear about. Mother was given a larger room at the Cairn household, and we lived with our mum in this one room, cooking, eating, washing and sleeping. Remember, there were 3 children and a baby and mother. Poor Mum, how she managed I don't know. Every night she would sit us down and go through our hair with a fine-toothed comb. She used to soak our hair with sassafras oil, then wash it with this special carbolic soap. Eventually she got us clean, but it must have been a terrible worry for her. The baby wasn't thriving as well as he should have been either. He was very sickly. I suppose it was the poor living conditions. One evening I persuaded my mother to let us go to the youth club with Mrs. Cairn's 2 grandchildren. She didn't want me to go in case there was an air raid, but eventually she gave in. I hadn't been gone half an hour when the air raid warning sounded. We went to a friend's house across the way from the youth centre. It was a terrible night and seemed to go on forever. Bombs were dropping all around us. One came very near to us, dropping in the backyard. Lucky for us, it was a time bomb. Penzance got it very bad that night. I think Plymouth was the target really. I remember walking home after it was all over. The town was a shambles. Meanwhile, my mother was frantic. She had my brother, sister and baby to pacify and nobody in the house to help her. Well, the months passed by. Christmas was very miserable. My mother decided she'd had enough. Dad was living in London alone, missing his family no doubt. We had a grandmother living in Braintree. Although Aunt Mabel only had a small cottage, she said we could all go and live with her. How she managed with all of us there, I don't know, but at least we were a family again, and all together. And in a child's life, that's all that matters, isn't it? They eventually ended up in a small cottage in Stubbs Lane in Braintree, and that particular area is now a big housing estate. How things change.